The amount of time it takes radioactive isotopes to decay is called their half-life, and it is astoundingly long. As a result, radioactive disasters or mishaps may be followed by lifetimes of poisoning. Tourists should be aware of some of the most hazardous locations on the Earth, so they can avoid them and avoid unnecessarily exposing themselves to radiation. Some regions of the world are off-limits for a generation or two, while others are completely erased from the map for all life as we know it. This depends on the spill or fallout event, the isotopes, and other factors. Today, we reveal the most radioactive places on Earth. Let's dive in. Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington, USA. As part of the infamous Manhattan Project, the Hanford site was the first place on Earth to make plutonium on a large scale. It was expanded so much during the Cold War that it could make enough radioactive chemicals to build more than 60,000 weapons. Even though it was shut down for good in the early 1970s, it still left more than 53 million gallons of waste and many leaking tanks that had to be cleaned up. Investigations in the 21st century have revealed that the Hanford site has been spewing tons of radioactive water into the Columbia River for over 25 years and leaking radioactive waste into the ground since 2010. The Hanford site, where the biggest environmental cleanup in U.S. history took place, is expected to stay dirty for many more years. The Mayak Production Association. This site has been the scene of more than one nuclear accident. Accidents at this plant were kept quiet until the 1980s. When a cooling system around one of the waste tanks broke down in 1957, it caused a huge explosion that shook the plant and spread deadly radiation particles over more than 7,700 square miles. The government didn't admit that the accident happened until many years after. About 50 people died in the 1957 accident, and over 450,000 people were exposed to radioactivity. It is considered to be one of the worst nuclear accidents ever. At the same time, the plant where it happened has come under fire for pumping its radioactive waste into lakes nearby. Sellafield, UK. Sellafield is another place known for pumping its waste into a water source. It has several plants and nuclear power stations. They used to dump more than 7 to 8 million liters of dangerous waste every day into the sea nearby. In 1957, the Windscale Piles plant was the site of the worst nuclear accident in Great Britain's history. This happened the same year as the Mayak accident. After a cartridge caught fire in one of the reactors, the fire spread and burned for more than 3 days, sending radioactive particles, including one that causes cancer, over a large part of the UK and Europe. After the accident, the reactors in the plant were shut down for good, and cleaning up the mess took until the early 21st century. Goyano, Brazil. This story began with a small theft and ended in tragedy. In 1987, 2 thieves broke into the empty Goyano Institute of Radiotherapy to steal scrap metal and get out. A strange device that eventually lit up blue was one of the things taken. After the thieves sold the broken device, the scrapyard owner that bought the device showed it to family and friends. The device had several owners before it was finally given to a hospital. It turned out to be a radioactive tool for treating cancer with doses of radiation that could kill. After the people who used the device got sick, the government was called in to destroy it. But by then, pollution had spread to a large area. 4 people died, and the amount of radioactivity in their bodies was too high for almost 250 of them. Somali Coast. You are wrong if you thought that organized crime didn't have anything to do with nuclear waste. An Italian crime group called the 'Ndrangheta is said to have loaded ships with nuclear waste and sunk them off the coast of Somalia and other developing African countries, polluting the water. This happened for years and in separate operations. Somalia's long-running civil wars kept a strong government from forming, so no one really paid attention to illegal dumping, which began in the 1980s. People believe that Swiss and Italian companies have used the area as a dump for many years. Now, the water near the coast is said to be very poisonous, and there are rumors that the dumping is still going on. Russia's Siberian Chemical Combine. This plant was built to make a lot of weapons-grade plutonium and highly enriched uranium. It is located in a closed town that can only be reached by showing documents at a checkpoint. In 1993, One of Russia's worst nuclear accidents happened at the Seven reprocessing complex. While nitric acid was used to clean a tank, it quickly got too hot and blew up. This sent out a lot of radiation around the plant and made the area around it much more radioactive. Even though the facility's ability to make plutonium and HEU has been shut down, it still stores low and intermediate levels of nuclear material for weapons and radioactive waste. Japan's nuclear power plant in Fukushima. During the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, huge waves hit the reactors at Fukushima's Daiichi and Daini power plants, breaking their cooling systems and putting them in danger of melting. The Fukushima Daini power plant was shut down in 2 days, but Daiichi wasn't as lucky. Disasters like the failure of emergency reactors, 3 nuclear meltdowns, explosions, and the release of radioactive material into the environment, especially into the Pacific Ocean, were all caused by this. The Fukushima disaster, thought to be the worst of its kind, caused unknown amounts of damage and probably made nearby people more likely to die from cancer. It also led to a 4-stage evacuation order. As of 2017, there are still no clear plans to shut down. Semipalatinsk Test Site, Kazakhstan. Make sure no one lives in the area before you start testing nuclear weapons. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union did most of its nuclear testing in an area called the Polygon. At the time, the government said that the area was uninhabited. They didn't seem to have done much research since over 700,000 people lived in the area while the tests were happening. Even though the site was officially closed in 1991, it is still one of the most contaminated nuclear zones on the planet. About 200,000 people are still sick because of the radiation from the bomb tests. Kyrgyzstan's Zapady Mining Chemical Combine. From 1946 to 1968, this was one of the biggest places where uranium ore was mined and processed for the Soviet nuclear weapons program. When it shut down, it left behind a lot of uranium pits or tailings on an unstable hillside above the nearby town of Mailuu-Suu. In 1958, a huge landslide dumped more than 1.6 million US gallons of radioactive waste on the town below. Among the top 10 most polluted and radioactive places in the world, this area is still being cleaned up, but it is taking a long time, and the hillside tailing sites still pose a threat. The Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, Ukraine. The accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is often thought to be the largest and worst nuclear disaster in history. It released more than 400 times the amount of radiation that the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. During a safety test, an explosion was set off. The resulting cracks of smoke spread dangerous levels of nuclear particles across much of the western USSR and Europe, affecting an estimated 6 to 7 million people. Over 31 people died from the event, and more than 100 people were hospitalized. Later, several people died of cancer. Even though all of this happened in 1986, the Chernobyl site is still closed because there is so much radiation there that it can't be cleaned up yet. There you have it, guys, the most radioactive places on Earth. Are there other radioactive areas on Earth we missed out on this list? Let us know your thoughts and observation in the comment section. If this video is insightful for you, then go on and like this video. Please kindly subscribe to our channel and click on the bell button for more of our updates.